one thing I've tried to get better at is that helps me on shift is just assuming good intent on other people's part. I think it's very
Absolutely.
easy to assume they're here for narcotics, they're pain seeking, they're just abusing the system. I mean, all the things you hear from everybody in the ER, when you're getting more cynical. But if you assume before you go into every room, just assume good intent on the person, it really helps my affect with them. It helps me talk with them and treat them like a human, and makes me much happier at the end of a shift. Because I mean, it's easy, especially if you're looking at social media and you see all the patients that had horrible ER visits. My algorithm for a while was showing me patients that are like, I can't believe this doctor didn't find this chronic super rare condition in
I love
my
those.
half
Yeah.
hour ER visit. Like, what a bunch of idiots. And then, you get indignant when you watch those
Yeah.
videos. You're like, I could tell you why they didn't find this in one ER visit. And if you assume every patient's like that, your affect with them is going to be terrible versus assuming good intent on their part, assuming that they're a good person, assuming they're a good human, because most of them are. I think just really helps how I act with the patient, how I talk with the patient, how I treat them, you know.
Yeah, and every one of us at some point will have the experience on the other side of the bedside that can affect how you see that moving forward.
Yeah.
For me, it was my wife. 2 years ago, she had metastatic melanoma, and your mind just goes to extremes with that kind of diagnosis. Like they're like, oh yeah, she's almost guaranteed to have 6 months in the initial pamphlet that we got, and it's like, what matters at that point? I felt it then, like when I'm trying to work shift, driving up to be at her bedside. It's like it's hard to focus in those kind of moments, but we always have something going on in our lives that make it harder than usual to focus. But just getting back to the basics and just realizing that you have something you can do in that moment that will be good, and that's the best motivation. Am I a star example of it? No. I violate my advice multiple times a shift, and I constantly have to remind myself of that. But the more you remind yourself, I think the better that you get.
Yeah.
And then just like anything else, the more you do something, the closer you are to it being a habit.
Being on the other side of the bed, so to speak, were there certain attitudes providers had or certain affects that they had that you appreciated being on that side of it?
Just the extra time. And that's that I had always theorized is a good thing, but feeling it, like the extra time to explain things, which even as a doctor, like we obviously don't know everything about every specialty, and we're talking about cellular level mechanisms and pathophysiology of novel drugs, and mechanisms. So it's overwhelming, just like it is for the average person to hear they have asthma, and taking a few moments to make sure they really understand and absorb what you say can be really helpful. And repetition is really helpful. There's studies that show people need to hear things like 3 times before they actually absorb it, at least in a student education-based setting. I think the same is true for our patients. Repeating things: you have cancer, you have cancer, you have cancer. Sometimes even having them say it just so that they understand it, because you meet people at different levels of denial or even suspicion in medicine and your intentions with treating them, especially the recent years. I think there's huge new causes of burnout and challenges from COVID and all the things that came from COVID, just the different political points and just conversation points out there in the media, and suddenly we went from heroes to being maligned in a lot of ways, and people not trusting us, and some of them are for good reasons, some of them are for bad reasons. But it's never a good time in the ER in the heat of the moment to let those things affect what you say or do.
That's a great point. That a lot of people now, probably more so than in recent decades, do have such a mistrust for the medical system. And all the things we're talking about are ways to reestablish that trust with them in a short amount of time, which is very difficult to do. But all these things will help with that ability for the patient to trust you when you say you're safe to go home, or on the other side, you have something seriously going on, we're going to admit you to the hospital. And I like that repetition too. I mean, that's not something I probably do very well, because you have the patient where you come in, you're like, you have appendicitis, you're going to the OR, any questions? You're like, well, what's going on? I'm like, well, I just told you appendicitis, but you have to realize this is an emergency for them. Like, this is just your
and
day
we're
to day.
teaching them.
Yeah.
It's almost like they're in a classroom at the same time.
Yeah.
They're learning new things.
Yeah. No, that's a great point about repeating things, especially things that they need to hear, so they actually can digest it, because it probably does take 2 or 3, I would imagine, especially when you're a deer in the headlights and the doctor comes in and tells you something seriously wrong. Your brain's not moving that quick.
Definitely.
Especially as being kind of a nocturnist, how do you balance fatherhood with our crazy schedule?
Being a nocturnist was part of that solution for me. I think that everyone has a different default. I feel the best when I work at these hours or sleep at these hours. And if you can identify that in yourself and sync up with it, your life is easier. And I think that's definitely true for me in working nights. I've always felt like those were my optimal work hours. I got the most focus, can get the most done. And that comes with unique challenges with having a family and spending quality time with them. And so thankfully my wife is amazing at scheduling things, and she's just a wizard with the calendar and like arranging childcare. But on that note, that's part of the changes that we're making in terms of making sure we have a good family life, which that's part of fatherhood. I'm going to work more so that my wife can work less and basically be PRN. She'll work, a shift here and there when she feels like it doesn't interrupt things or whatnot, and still keep up her skills. And that's a huge decision as a physician couple, because we met in the first year of medical school in the cadaver lab. We spent thousands of hours learning how to do what we do. So like, how do you say, I'm just not going to do that anymore? Well, it's not what she's doing. She's going to do it here and there. But this time in our lives with young kids, 5 and 2, we feel like every moment counts with them. And part of the problems we see in the world are just kids not having good parenting anymore. And for me, I contribute more to society if my child turns out to be a good person than if I am the most amazing ER doctor in the world.
Yeah.
That's a bigger contribution.
Yeah.
And so I think that finding those priorities in your family life and how you're going to accomplish those is how you stay happy. And it took learning. It's still a practice.
Yeah.
But I think that I'm finally kind of finding that the nocturnist thing is just what's best for me. And we're going to make it work just around, it's definitely more, you have to be more intentional about when you're going to do things. Mm-hmm. And we're going to have date night this night. We're going to spend time with the kids in the mornings when I'm off and they wake up. Let my wife sleep if she needs to. And that'll evolve more as she goes down in her shifts next year when we accomplish that. But we're very focused on our family and just making sure our family thrives, and everything else is arranged around that. But you have to work. You have to pay back the student loans. You got to pay the bills. You don't come out of residency financially independent. So all those things have to be factored in. But working 22 shifts a month and never seeing your family, your wife, or your partner is not going to end well.
Yeah.
The white coat financial guy likes to say that that's the most important investment you can make is the date night.
Yeah.
And it's true. I think that chaos comes from not spending time together and not communicating. And that's something I continually learn to get better at. But communicating and having some kind of app or something where we can sync our millions of different things, all the meetings and section meetings, educational things that we're doing for medical students and kids dance and t-ball practice. Like all those things have to happen and come together.
Yeah. We were fortunate enough that my wife was able to stay home for several years when we started having kids, and now she's going back to work. And so doing a shared calendar has been absolutely
Huge.
key to like, okay, I can't schedule anything that day. Megan's got some things going on. We've got the kids stuff that day. And then, yeah, you have to be so intentional about date nights because, man, it's easy to totally go a month or 2 or 6 without
it's
doing
crazy
date
how
nights.
quick, like my wife's reminded me about it a few times, and it's crazy how many months go by rapidly when you're not actively thinking about it. So
Yeah.
that's important.
Yeah, because it's, you want to prioritize your kids' activities and getting them to things, but it is important to prioritize your number one relationship, which is you and your spouse. Because you can't operate as good partners with each other if you're not getting on the same page and just talking about non-schedule related things and dumb stuff and stuff with your kids. And if you can just have that dedicated time, an hour or two every couple of weeks. I try to, our goal is, once every couple of weeks, and we can't even make that happen half the time. It requires a lot of intentionality. You got to get a babysitter and you got to make sure your schedules are lined up, and it's hard, but it's worthwhile.
And then there's definitely, there's hard times when it's not possible, but the key in those times is to be communicating about it. That's what I've learned.
Yeah. Yeah.
As long as there's that, then there's a path forward.
Yeah. Do you have any tips or tricks to go from ER doctor mode to husband and dad mode when you get off shift so that you're actually mentally present with your family? Because it's hard to, especially after a rough shift, it's hard to kind of move on sometimes. And sometimes it sounds like you probably go immediately to that mode before you go to bed.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's, I think it's different for everyone, but for me, the most important thing to offload my mind is to have my notes done. Because if they're done, then I don't have that piece of my mind that's still wondering. But sometimes it helps to just answer the unresolved questions that are lingering in my head about people. Like, I thought about this, thought about that. I haven't read about that in a while. So I read about some random medical condition for 10 minutes in the driveway before I walk in the house. And okay, I have a conflict resolved in my head and I don't have to think about it anymore. Mm-hmm. It's better than doing that inside when you've just walked in, because I've noticed that if you're like, looking stuff up or still checking haiku to see how a patient's doing, then it's like it ruins that initial like moment of being together. Yeah. So at least delaying it for a while is better than doing it right away.
Yeah. I mean, 10, 15 minutes spent in your car before you go in is better than 3 hours of not being mentally present with your family.
And, stopping at the gym can help with that. Some people do a run. Some people, just have alone time. But I try to go to church if I can, especially Sundays. But I can usually go to daily mass after the end of a shift if the time lines up, and that's something that I grew up doing, and something I want my kids to experience at least some of, as much as possible. So those kind of priorities are the ones that drive, I think, being happy in the fatherhood and family unit is just keeping your eyes on what matters and not the house and all the sports and things like that that you like classically identify as like being a dad, like helping with the coaching and things like that. I'm not saying those are bad things. They all have value in themselves, character building, all that. But there's different levels of fulfillment depending on what you're spending your time doing, and how you spend your time together as a family certainly affects the time that you're not together, and how that goes.
Yeah. Yeah, church attendance is one of those things that we've never been great at being consistent. Of course, you can blame our
The
ER
schedule's insane.
schedules.
Yeah, it's so easy to blame. So easy to blame.
Especially like, when you're in school and, when I was making that transition into PA school and then working as a PA, it was easy to be like, we're not going to go to church for a period of time. But I have found that attending at least more regularly does really help recenter you and reminds you of things that you just don't get, just reading the Bible or, spending your own time. A lot of times the church gives you that recentering and you're like, okay, especially if they do a great job of not addressing every cultural and political thing. I think it's great to not have that be your center of focus and actually the foundation of what you believe
No
being the
doubt.
focus, I think really helps.
Absolutely.
My pastor does a great job of not addressing every popular political and cultural thing. Because sometimes you're like, why are they not talking about this? It's been all over the news or whatever it is. I think it's much more refreshing to have just the basics, the foundation kind of reset as opposed to jumping on every popular thing like we all see on social media and
We have
whatever your
enough of that.
algorithm's feeding you.
Yeah, we have enough of that outside.
100%. I don't
For
need
sure.
more. I don't need more commentary
Yeah,
on the stuff that's going on.
absolutely.
Do you have any particular stories from your career that have helped remind you why you do this?
I think I could spend lots of time thinking of different ones that have varying levels, but the one that I can just spit out at the top of my head, where it combined both feeling satisfied by the technical skill that I demonstrated at the time, and also the humanistic side of someone having more time with their family. There's a guy that had come in with a dissection, aortic dissection, and they were calling the surgeons to come see him, but the time frame wasn't happening quick enough because of varying limiting factors. And basically he was dying in front of me and didn't have any family around because he was flown there from way outside of where we were. And so he's awake and talking to me, and his blood pressure drops. We figure out, well, he's dissecting into his pericardium and has a tamponade. And so there was a bunch of people there. It kind of makes it memorable in some ways. There's surgery residents, surgery attendings. Like, we were all just talking about what to do. And finally, someone had to make a decision, and that person was me at that time. And the guy, he still ultimately ended up dying. Like, anyone that takes care of these patients probably could have anticipated that's how that ended. But he did get to talk to his family for like 2 or 3 days in the ICU while his gut was dying and things like that. But like, I made that decision with him. Like, that was one of his goals, was get to talk to his family. And sometimes it's more important to help someone die than it is to help them live. And that's how he wanted to die. So that was super fulfilling. And also like the peak emergency medicine procedural, like exciting dopamine rush moment, to do something like that. But, that I just remember that, with the way we get people that are dying, and sometimes they've already made their peace and they don't want to go through an extremely, morbid procedure, cracking their chest and abdomen open, fixing their aorta, and sitting there and talking them through those things, and finding the best way to show them mercy is the way to go. And so that one sticks out in my head.
Yeah.
I think about it a lot.
Yeah, that's a great one. That can carry you through a lot of bad shifts.
Yeah. Yeah, there's times when you're like, it can't be as hard as that.
Yeah. Well, I think it's so important to take that second that one's obviously super memorable in and of itself, but just taking the small good things that we do in our shift, whether it was just a good conversation to reassure someone. I think our brains fixate on the negative, and it's so easy to remember all the negative stuff that happens. There's a ton of it. People die, you can't save them. Patients are unhappy with their ER visit, whatever it is, the belligerent drunk. And it's easy to think about that the whole way home. But it's better to take that couple deep breaths and just fixate on the good conversation you had, or the life you saved when that happens on occasion, and try to remember that and put that in your long-term memory. Because I feel like the good just goes in your brain and out so easily unless you do something intentional to grab onto it.
It's easier said than done to focus on the good, not the bad. But anything worth having in life takes work to accomplish, and creating stops in your mind and forcing yourself to try and remember the more important things.
Yeah. And it's worth understanding too that not every patient wants our help either. I mean, you have a lot of the patients, and I see that burn staff out too. The patient elects to go home and you very much want them to be admitted and start all these medications on them, IV antibiotics or whatever it is. And they opt to go home. And that I see that burn people out. Like, I can't believe they would decide to not do our ideal plan for them. And you have to come up with a really good plan B, like oral antibiotics or, go see wound care, whatever plan B you have that's suboptimal and not what you would choose. You can't let that burn you out either, because people have autonomy and they get to choose to stay or go. And you can't let that burn you out and get angry at them either. Because you see a lot of the staff be like, well, let's just get them out of here. Then they don't want our medicine. And you're like, well, we need to figure out a good alternate plan.
You never know when you're going to be the last one to interact with someone, and you might be the difference between them coming back to the hospital or staying away. Mm-hmm. Like, depending on how you frame it.
Yeah, totally.
You got to tell people what they need. That's part of our job. But at the same time, obviously we can't force people to do things as much as we wish sometimes. And trying to balance getting frustrated is tough with that. But knowing that if you send them out negatively instead of positively can make a difference morally, medical legally. It's pretty much a no-brainer. Like, if someone's leaving against your advice, you want them to not be leaving negatively if possible.
Yeah. Do you have any advice you would give to your younger self 6 years ago, maybe, when you first started attending?
Yeah, I think we all wish that we spent less, save more, simple things like that, financial things, but also just not trying to go too fast, too hard. Like, I remember the first December that I was out of residency, I think I worked at least 22 shifts, and that number sticks in my head because it was just like particularly challenging. Like, I remember getting off at 7 a.m. at one hospital and driving to the next hospital for an 11 to 9. And it was so much. And like, man, is it still to this day like the biggest paycheck I got? Yeah. But would I do it again? No. And was it worth it at the time? No, it wasn't, because I could have spaced that out and enjoyed that month more. I'm never going to get that month back as a 20-something-year-old. That goes way quick. I was 29.
22, that's brutal. I think the most I've worked in a maybe 17 or 18, and I was like, oh, never again. I can't do 17 or 18. Just in kind of closing thoughts, any advice for believers that are new in the profession that you would give?
Try to do everything you do in prayer. I think that it will always get you to the right answer. And very simply, just know that if you call yourself Christian, then you should be displaying the Christian examples that are all there written for us. And every time we don't, it's an opportunity lost for someone else to see the right path, and potentially also your own reward spiritually.
I like that. I think being a good example, often that's all we can do. It's, we're not preaching the gospel to everybody. We're not even talking about faith on shift. We just don't have time a lot of times. You're doing the job, you're doing the tasks. So being a good example, and hopefully people see that and they're like, there's something different about you, and hopefully they can take that just as your example.
If you had to focus on one virtue, it would definitely be charity. and that's easy. That was our number one commandment.
Yeah, that's
So,
great.
so love one another as you would yourself, and to love God above all else. So I think that that's the most sound way. Are there other methods? Yes, but using your faith, there shouldn't be a dichotomy. You shouldn't have to leave your faith at home. It's your best ally at work for sure.
That's great. Any other closing thoughts or anything you wanted to talk about that we didn't touch on?
No, but it was a blast. Thanks for having me, and I'm sure we could think of something else at some point. Maybe talk about ultrasound sometime.
Totally.
I didn't fully prepare for that today, but there's lots of. I'm always happy to talk about ultrasound, but I thought it was great. I think you're doing a cool podcast here, so I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for spending the time. Appreciate you.
Absolutely.